Alright, I'm going to be tying a fly called a Hazel Creek, which I had seen years ago in some magazines and started tying them parachute style. And according to Don Kirk in his book, he attributes the Hazel Creek to Waynesville fly tyer Roger Lowe. And honestly, that's probably pretty accurate. We're going to give him credit for it anyway. I made a few tweaks on the recipe for my own, but when I'm tying a parachute, most people will use some type of feather or a calf tail as their post. And for my parachute flies, I like to use Antron yarn straight off of a card or Polypro, and I tie it in facing the eye just like you would a regular calf hair parachute post, but then I will make a couple of little changes here. So once I've got that part wrapped in, I'll trim this off just a little bit and then go back here and sort of bury it. And then when I get to the front, instead of just standing it up, I am going to actually stand it up, fold it over, and make a loop in it. I know it's hard to see with that white background, but I'm just looping it over, and then I'm going to tie that little loop back in. Tie that down. And then I'll just tie that off right, or cut that off right there. And got a nice thick post. It's easier to stand up that way rather than just building a dam in front, or a ramp if you will, and pulling it up. So then I'm going to do a few around and down wraps to lock it in. And then I'm going to do, and honestly with this the Polypro doubled over like this part is a lot easier. This is going to give us a nice solid platform to wrap the hackle feather around, and another couple of around and downs, and that's a nice solid parachute post. And by the way, I am getting every last bit of thread off of this little orange spool of thread. So then I'm going to wrap towards the bend and tie in the tail, which for this fly is golden pheasant tippet. So let me select some tail fibers here. And then I'm going to tie them in. A good place to put them is where that little black band is. And I'll just... Alright, for the body, I like to use bright yellow rabbit dubbing. So I will wax the thread. And a lot of times I will dub this. I'll start the dubbing near the post, work my way back to the bend, and then work my way back towards the post. You don't want to put it on too thick, but I found that going back and coming back over itself does a good job of covering up that orange thread. But what I've also found is after you catch a few fish and the yellow dubbing starts coming unwound, if you will, picking apart, and the orange starts showing through, it doesn't lose any fish catching ability at all. In fact, let's see, I got a little piece of thread right there I'd like to cover up. There we go. Alright, now you can see it's got some guard hair fibers that will stick out and make this look like a buggy fly. So I'm going to add a little bit more. I fish with this quite a bit in the summer. It's a good summer attractor pattern. A lot of yellow flies are hatching during that time. Floats like a battleship and is very durable. I catch a lot of fish on this fly. Tied some for some guys who went out west, and they called me up and they were so excited. They had all used my particular Parachute Hazel Creek, and I think between 7 fly fishermen, they had caught like 250 fish that day, and a couple of them had 50 fish days just on one of these flies. So anyway, this is tie the body up to about right there. Doesn't have to have too much of a taper. The hackle, I'm using a brown hackle feather that I got from a half a neck. Trim it up and tie it in. And then I will just add a little more dubbing around the post. So the one final touch of dubbing just to cover up that orange below the post and bring it up to the eye. Let's see if that's enough. So I'll go back around to make sure I get that covered good. And then a few wraps in front. And basically I'll just cover this up because the hackle is going to go over top of that. Alright, then finally wrapping the hackle. I wrap it very close together, work my way up the post. Then I will slowly work my way back down the post, sort of trying to separate the fibers a little. And maybe one more. So that is a little thicker, a little more hackle than a lot of people put on their parachute flies. About the only time I use my hackle pliers in this process is now. And then I've seen a lot of different methods of trying to get the hackle out of the way so you could whip finish this fly. This particular method has worked for me. We'll call it the old Scotch tape method. I basically just pull everything back and tape it down, and then pull the feather forward, make a few wraps over it, and then trim. And then we clean up some of these little fibers down here. This is when I am notorious. I don't know about you. Notorious for cutting the thread right then. Alright, finish the head up. Got one more little fiber that wants to get trapped. And then whip finish. While I still have the hackle out of the way, I will add a dab of head cement. And usually I'll give that just a little time to cure before I pull the tape off, but and I will reuse that piece of tape a couple of times. And in the final step on this little fly, fluff the hackle up, is get rid of the loop and trim just a little bit. And this is what I call a Parachute Hazel Creek. From top view, it's easy to see that white contrasted over top of the brown hackle. Got an orange head and the orange pheasant tail, or pheasant tippet tail. And this is a fly that catches a lot of fish for me. This is the Parachute Hazel Creek.